I've got to ask you some Texas-specific things if you've got a second here.
I'm ready.
Our governor, Rick Perry, who I've interviewed a couple of times in the past 3 or 4 days, is just steaming mad. And in a soundbite a few days ago, he said, I don't want Texans to get so angry that they end up wanting to secede. Can we put a rest to this once and for all? Does Texas or any other state in this great union have the right today to secede from the nation?
Yes. They have the right to nullify and to secede. It was understood by the people who wrote the Congress. Look, when George Washington signed the Fugitive Slave Law, which required you to capture and return runaway slaves, the state of Massachusetts enacted a law nullifying it and said, we will prosecute anybody in the state of Massachusetts who cooperates with the Fugitive Slave Law. Now, this hasn't happened since the days of slavery, but it is a check on an overbearing, heavy hand of the federal government that a state will say, enough is enough. This would cause a tremendous constitutional crisis. But if enough states said, we're going to call a constitutional convention, we're going to tell our people not to follow this federal law, we're going to enact a resolution seceding from the Union, the Congress would finally start to listen.
Okay, well, what's interesting here is what I've always learned is that Texas, when it joined the Union and agreed to be annexed, that it agreed to be annexed in that it could break into 5 states if necessary to get 2 senators from each state to have more power in Washington if they weren't happy about what was going on.
It also agreed, and the Congress accepted this condition, that it could leave if it wanted to.
Right, but
one may argue the Civil War negated that, and that's a legitimate argument to make.
Right.
But the law is still on the books and has never been abrogated by either party, Congress or the Texas legislature.
And that's, again, there are websites about Texas secession and all this stuff, but for me, what I've always thought, what I've always learned, especially in the 4 years I've lived in Texas, was that after the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln said never again, and it seemed, I guess it's not in writing anywhere, but it seemed to me that there was an agreement among the states, yes, we'll rejoin the Union, never to secede again.
Don't get me started on Abraham Lincoln. He was less faithful to the Constitution than any president in American history.
That's why I read your books.
700,000 human beings because he wanted to collect tariffs from southern ports. He was no more interested in freeing the slaves than he was jumping over the moon. He decided to free them for a military measure because Robert E. Lee was getting too close to Washington, D.C.
But that's what the history books say. He freed the slaves. The Emancipation Proclamation was out of his mouth, and he's always going to get credit for that. But
that's because we all learn history from the teachers' unions, and they believe in big government.
Okay, I won't get you going on Abraham Lincoln if you don't get me going on the teachers' unions, okay? All right, another question here. The 10th Amendment is what Governor Perry has been citing for a week and a half, 2 weeks now, that the 10th Amendment, he says that it says, and I'm not anywhere near as smart as you or him, but he says that the 10th Amendment provides that the federal government will be created by the states to be a backup system to the states, but the states shall be allowed to run their own little mini countries on their own. Is that kind of what...
The 10th Amendment basically says all powers not given to the federal government are reserved to the states and to the people. And the 9th Amendment says the same thing. And the Constitution itself only gives 17, count them, 17 specific, unique, discrete powers to the federal government. From those 17, it is expanded to the monster it is today through people like Lincoln and Wilson and FDR and LBJ and all the big government presidents since him of both parties. Is right.
And again,
what the government does is not justified by the Constitution.
I hear you, and I believe you, just as I believed him. But knowing what you just said to be true, how is it that we have a federal government that tells us whether abortion can or can't be legal? How is it that we have a federal government that can force us through penalty of holding back road funding to make us lower or raise our speed limit, or lower or raise our
government that can tell us how big our toilets are and what the pressure of our showers can be because we let it do it.
Okay, so we never called them on it.
Republicans and under Democrats, we just let it write laws that regulate private human behavior that was in no way ever delegated to the feds and just looked the other way, and now we have to live with it.
I don't want to run out of time.